Hi everyone, this is a video edition of the Scattered podcast. I'm Yvonne Chorlin. I'm a physical or biological anthropologist and archaeologist, and this is a short video of my contribution to the Alberta portion of a cross-Canada scavenging project led by Dr. Sherry Forbes. To learn more about Sherry and the origin of this project, listen to episode 16 of the audio portion of this podcast. In a nutshell, law enforcement need to recover as much potential forensic evidence as possible to help solve cases. They approach Sherry with two questions. Where do we search for this evidence and how far do we search for it? To help answer these questions, Sherry wants to identify the scavengers and their scavenging behavior to figure out who may have influenced the movement of this evidence, and then also to map the dispersal of the evidence so we know where it went. By identifying the scavengers and their scavenging behavior and mapping the dispersal of the evidence, we hope to see patterns and be able to answer the two questions of where and how far to search for the remains so that we can answer this for law enforcement. So having these ideas and these questions is all fine and dandy, but how do you do this? How do you identify the scavengers and map the dispersal of the remains? Well, that's where this video comes in. I'm going to show you. Alright, so this is Okotoks open. Our pig, our very big pig, about 300 pounds worth of pig, is sitting in here by the Sheep River, just west of Okotoks. West of Okotoks, Alberta. So, like the other ones in Lethbridge, we have two trackers on this pig. One on the forelimb there, and one on the hind limb there. So they're both on the same side this time. And we are very near a river. There's a bit of a low area in here for one of the tributaries. The embankment of the north side, so this is north over here. The embankment on the north side is about 100 meters that way. The embankment and wet side of the river is to the south that way. So we've got our pig here. We've got a camera over there, camera and cable. So we've got the pig cabled to a tree over there with the camera. We dragged the pig in from over there. There's a bit of a trail in a separate video over there. And we have a camera over there which Sherry's setting up right now. While the pig was being set up and Sherry was setting up the cameras, I took notes and photographs of the pig and the surrounding area, and I made a sketch map of any topographical features including fence lines, buildings, and roads. Then we set the cameras and we left and waited for the scavengers to show up. Much like our Okotoks forest site, we had a lot of animal and human activity at our Okotoks open site. The animals seemed to like it and they came back, and a lot of them returned. We had bears, coyotes, a fox, a moose, a skunk, and some humans. It is July 7th, 2023. This is Okotoks Open. This pig was deposited on August 12th, 2022. So it's been almost a year that this pig has been out. So we've got an empty tributary right there. There is a stream behind us. North is that way, south, east, west. The pig, original deposition point was right there. We flattened it all so we could have a look to see what was in there. And as you can see from the flags, very little dispersal, sort of randomized here in the center. We had one over there. There's a bit of a game trail. There was nothing on the game trail that we saw, but there was one remain just over there. So as usual in the deposition point, there was mainly ribs and vertebrae. However, we have had limbs well represented here. We had the pig in a shirt and shorts. So the shirt is here. The shorts are just over there. We had both scapula are just right here. So there's the original deposition point there. Both scapulus and limb bones, as well as ribs and vert. Full mandible there. Full skull just to the east of the original deposition point. And we also had femur, humerus, and then the ulna and radius. That looks like that's where we drilled for the tracker. One of the trackers, this pig had 2 trackers. One of the trackers was drilled through the ulna, and that ulna and radius is still articulated and just sitting up there on the rise. So we haven't found the trackers associated with this site, at least not yet. A Calgary police member has gone looking for them and hasn't found either tracker. So it looks like we didn't find any trackers for this site. And it looks like everything is within 20-meter radius of the original deposition point. And when I did an inventory on the remains we recovered about 1 year after we deposited the pig, I found that we had recovered about 40% of the skeleton. This was one of our top sites for recovering the most remains. When I looked at what types of bones made up the remains we recovered, I saw it was mostly vertebrae, ribs, and limbs. What do we know so far? Our main scavengers at this site seem to be bear, coyote, and fox. There were lots of other animals too that may have contributed to the scavenging and dispersal of the remains. We had human and animal activity at this site, and they may have influenced each other. There was a minimal dispersal of the remains in a random pattern, and both trackers were unrecovered. The pre-existing trail that we observed did not seem to be used in the dispersal of the remains. We recovered about 40% of the skeleton, and the remains we recovered nearest the original deposition point were vertebrae, ribs, and limbs. What have we learned overall across all our sites? We learned that our main scavengers are coyotes, bears, and birds. Game trails can be created or used by scavengers to access the carcass and to disperse the remains. We learned that sometimes there is a difference in the number of remains observed at the preliminary search and the number of remains collected at the final search. We also learned that we mostly collected vertebrae and ribs. This video wouldn't have been possible without the study led by Dr. Shari Forbes. The Calgary and Edmonton Police Service were instrumental in helping us to find land to use, coordinate the searches and carcasses, and of course, to let us know if this information is useful to them. Many big thanks to the landowners and pig growers. We couldn't have done this research without you. To find out more about this study, tune into my podcast, Scattered, One Person's Search for the Story Behind Human Remains, available on your favorite podcast platform. Also, check out the other videos in this series, available on my website, yvonnechorlin.com, and read about it on my blog and on Facebook.